Dishpur and Kamrupa. These were the names by which Assam today were known historically, and references to these places, the cultures, the languages, and especially he talked about the surviving archaeological evidence through which we know how these interactions took place linguistically, and the dimensions of that have come to us in living cultural form. How things are operating in society today through different cultural items and practices. So this is indeed a wonderful exposition, the culture in which we live and occupy and interact. And as he pointed out, that I'm not very certain how far I would understand Uriya, but Bengali I understand fully as an Assamese. And Uriya, because I have many Uriya friends, and Dr. Mishra, I have been talking to him, he's a wonderful person. So we have been interacting, and there are so many things. Whenever he says something about Orissa and about some story, he has been telling me lots of stories. So suddenly I can sense that, oh, this is something which I'm familiar. Not that I know the story, but there's something in the cadence, something in the culture, the trope, which makes me connect to what I have known, not necessarily what I've read, but what I've heard. And this, I think, is the beauty of multilingual India. So I think Professor Das has rightly set the tone by giving us a foundation, giving us a map of how we can see the connections between these different traditions, linguistically, culturally, and folkloristically, as people and as societies who interact, not necessarily people to people, but through language and through the way we converse in our daily lives. I think I'll stop my presentation here. If there are other questions and interactions, I'll take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chaudhuri, for your brilliant speech. Now I request Professor Hitendra Patel on behalf of Bengali language.
Distinguished co-panelists, Professor Chaudhuri, Professor Mishra, and Professor Das. I was really wondering why NBT thought of me to speak on this complex theme, but maybe Routine and others have thought that a historian is needed to put things in perspective. Maybe that could be the reason. But I'm really delighted to be here for one reason. History comes as a help, definitely, when we talk about such an issue like language. I'll ask you a question, and you will get the answer, wherefrom I should start the discussion. Have you come across any Bhakta poet to complain about the language problem in communication with the people? If they move towards another region, they don't complain. No complaint. You can find Shankar Dev doing wonders in what is called Assam today. We can find Chaitanya traveling to Bihar, in Goa, in Orissa, and he is equally respected everywhere. And you can find this kind of connections in northern India also, when Mira is talked about which language a Bhakta belongs to. So you have automatically come to a point that language was not a problem in India. There was something which was common, which could connect people from one region to another, and language was not a problem. So language becomes a problem in the time when we started getting a new education in colonial period. Then we started charting out a kind of divisions that this linguistic zone belongs to this language, and thereafter there was a clash. But still, even at that time, there were people who'd understand that our nationalism should not be defined in such a way that languages can be a barrier. I can give only one example. Today, when I see a Hindi fanatic, quote unquote, Hindi enthusiast, I remind them that the Hindi movement had the biggest boost from the people who came from different regions. I can only think of Dayananda and Mahatma Gandhi in National Connection. But what is more significant, that Hindi movement was supported by two very important people, Keshav Chandra Sen and Bhudev Mukhopadhyay. One would be surprised to know that Hindi movement was inspired in a way, led by in a way, by Bhudev Mukhopadhyay, who was there in Bihar, and he was the man who actually gave the lead. So the point is that the differences became more pronounced after we started dealing with a question, dealing with the intervention of an ideology called nationalism. There is one great scholar, Hajari Prasad Dwivedi. He was from Shantiniketan, and he had a very good connection with what Rabindranath had tried to articulate in many different ways. He said that in India, we had a kind of relationship with others in which assimilation was the key thing, assimilation. But suddenly, in various ways, we quarreled, foreign interventions came and all that. But important thing was that we could assimilate each and everything. Our digestive system was so powerful. Culturally, we were so powerful that anything, anybody could be welcome. But now in 19th century, there comes a problem. This language is something around which we have developed a kind of discourse that these differences are something which could not be negotiated if we do not really give a special and exclusive space to one language, to one region. And that is where we will find a very ridiculous kind of situation. Our scholars, esteemed friends, are talking about the commonness. The commonness. And we find that in Assam, there was anti-Bengali movement. In Odisha, there was an anti-Bengali. I find it ridiculous in some ways, because you see, through these protests, what we actually could not understand at the time, that these differences are not fundamental. These are not fundamental. And there was a kind of connect. There was a kind of connect which is very, very significant. And those traces of connections are to be underlined now, because we are thinking of a situation in which the knowledge about our tradition, knowledge about linguistic connections and all that needs to be redefined. And here my first point would be that we must question, we must problematize, we must be very critical about the way we have thought about the language or linguistic questions, which was primarily informed by the colonial ideology. And that is the point I would like to come again in the latter part of my take on it. Now, beautiful example, beautiful way examples are there before you. What is uniqueness, which Professor Das talked about? What is unique and what is common? The colonial ideology does one thing. It harps on differences and don't talk about the connecting points. And therefore, we find that these become hostile zones, which were represented ably by people who will fight for that zone. And therefore, we have large number of fake kind of encounters. We have to understand that there is one Hindi novelist, great novelist, Amritlal Nagar. And actually this whole idea comes from Rabindranath Tagore. I'm using Amritlal Nagar's metaphor to make it more communicable. You see, he talks about boond, drop, and the ocean, samudra, boond or samudra. Every boond, every drop is unique. And every unique drop understand that it is part of the sea. So Bund or Samudra cannot fight against each other. The uniqueness of the drop is not going to stop it becoming dissolvable in the sea. That is how it is. Another metaphor used by another scholar is that tree metaphor. The branches, the leaves and all that. These are the things which are very common to us. But as a student of history, I thought that this must be reminded to people, at least for young people. These are very scholarly people. I'm not addressing to them. I cannot, because they are the experts who have devoted decades on this kind of study. So I cannot address them. I can only remind that please bring history into it. Otherwise, the entire understanding of the language linguistics, these would be somewhat problematic. And at least it would not be appreciated by common people why these differences are not something around which we can be very, very serious, as if these things are not to be, not something which can be not be resolved. There are some issues, and those are very genuine issues. Yesterday, there was a very interesting talk in which 4 great scholars were discussed, and all of them actually talked about the commonness. All of them. And the differences they had was not of the nature that these differences cannot be resolved. But still, the colonial ideological knowledge gave us something to fight over. Hindi as the one kind of Hindi, and the imposition of, another kind of Hindi which was called by Hindustani and colloquial bazaar language. Now, if you compare, and the examples are very remarkable. The kind of examples we came across in the last two presentations, I found that absolutely there is nothing which can actually question it, that these 3 languages are not in connect, at least at the popular level. And this is very fundamental, this is important. One of the major mistakes we commit, when we talk about language, we normally think of language. And that is a big difference. It's a very stupid kind of thing. Please remember, Professor Das is talking about standardization. For that you require centuries. You need to focus that these languages were there, and on that channel you will find a free flowing, a kind of river like, which I call Bhakt-like flow of Chaitanya from Bengal to up to Odisha, and passing through Bihar, Gaya, there is no problem over there. So this river flow like, this is a perspective which we have to rediscover. Otherwise, what will happen? We always will be able to find something about which we can fight on. Now, obviously, we can have a kind of technical debate. What were the differences? How these idioms get different forms, and in spite of these differences, we do see certain kind of connect, but still there are differences. We can do that. And for that, I think the political reading of it is very significant. Unless and until we understand that there are issues, there are things which cannot be given or left to the politicians to decide, we will not find a solution. We have seen in the last 100 years how 2 languages have been divided. I'm talking about Hindi and Urdu, which did not have that kind of hitch for centuries. But once you bring in something in order to divide, draw a line, then you will find the differences. You will find the differences in the 3 languages we talk about. And therefore, I think we need to write a different and better history of the connectivities between or among these languages. And here Rahul Sankrityan gives us some important clues. And I refer to Rahul Sankrityan because he has that kind of understanding in which these languages are evolving in tandem. You will find Bhakti movement, and before that he talked about Prakriti and all kind of association about which some references have been given. There are differences, there are problems, but still these languages speak to each other, connect to each other. What we have to do is now to see the commonness, see the connections, and therefore we may say that this living tradition of languages actually gave us the confidence that languages do not divide. It brings the civilizational unity to the forefront. We only have to evolve a kind of perspective, a kind of civilizational understanding of these things. Then only we will be able to understand. I'm happy that even in this kind of a short discussion, I could raise 1 or 2 points about which we will talk about in our discussion, if it is there. I can see Professor Devendra Chaubey is also here. He has done immense work on literary history of India, and he particular reference to Hindi. And he is working on a project with some of his young scholars. I hope that these things will be better understood if these kind of new innovative works are taken into consideration. I thank you, NBT, for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Patel. Thank you for a historian's perspective in a post-colonial setup. Now I request Dr. Mohendra Mishra on behalf of Korea.
Today's session's moderator, Professor Das, Professor Patel, Professor Chaudhary, and coordinator, Mr. Bratinde, and Srimati Neera Jain, the Joint Director of NBT. I am thankful to the NBT that they have invited me to speak on multilinguality in India. Here I listened to 3 friends, and all are highly knowledgeable, and they are in the practice of knowledge. And here I was wondering that how we can distinguish the Assamese, Bengali, and Oriya if all these 3 languages are emerged from Udra Magadhi. So we all are perhaps forgetting the Udra Magadhi, and that Udra Magadhi has in course of time with land, politics, and identity. Language has these 3 things, that identity and politics and geography determines the nature of the mind of the people. And that really creates identity. And we don't know why and how. When Mr. Pati was talking about Bhakti movement, there is no such issue like how Shankar Dev is from Assam or Chonidas is from Bangla and Chaitanya is from somewhere from Bangladesh or Odisha. All these are very temporal things, but this connecting things are really knowledge. The land, language, and life of a particular region really determines the nature of knowledge that is created collectively by the people. And those knowledges have really contributed to the construction of Indian culture. So there are 3,000 languages. In the census of India, we may have a lot of things, but we must say that there must be about 2,000 languages. And in those 2,000 languages are maybe different in their language family groups, but in respect of knowledge and mind and thought, they are one. भाषा अनेक, लेकिन सोच एक है. और इंडियन मल्टीलिंगुअलिटी इज सच दैट हमारे देश का ये जो बहुभाषिकता है, इस बहुभाषिकता को समझाने के लिए यूरोप या अमेरिका का भाषा विज्ञान यथेष्ट नहीं है. They are incapable of understanding our Indian way of thinking or Indian way of speaking the languages. Therefore, over the last 2,500 years, when Yaska, Panini, and the writer of Saraswati Kanthabharanam and Bharata Muni, all these people have spoke about the phonetics of Indian languages. All those things are eroded in our national curriculum. It is not there. And I told this government also to please put all these names at least for the Indian phonetic system. We are not going to bother about the sound and symbol system that is in English language. But our sound and system, हम अगर कमल कहते हैं तो कामला ही कहते हैं, चमलो नहीं कहते. We don't say CH, C माने साइकिल, C माने कैमल और C माने चर्च. ये C में 3 शब्द आता है, हमारा उसमें कोई मतलब नहीं है. Because we are not bothered about your English phonetics in Indian language. Indian phonetics, हम जो कहते हैं वो करते हैं. आप जो कहते हो नहीं करते हो, इसलिए आप ब्यूटी बट कहते हो और प्यूटी को पुट कहते हो. ये अलग बात है. Anyway, so I have really witnessed, because I read Asmij, I have read Rama Saraswati Shiva Mangal Kavya. Professor Birendra sent that to me. I read Bengali language from 1986 because I stayed in Calcutta for 1 month and there I learned language in Rabindra Bharat University and a lot of Rabindra literature and folklore. Then Odia literature, 700 years of Odia literature, written literature. But beyond this, you forget about the written literature of all these 3 states. Now these are 3 states, 3 chief ministers are there, forget it. But see the knowledge side of these 3 places. How can you distinguish it? Magha, even Bhojpuri, Maithili, Nepali, you cannot distinguish it from Assam, Odisha and Bengal also. So there is no boundary of cultural knowledge in India. There could be political boundary of states, 24 states and some union territories. But as regards to literature, language and culture and mind, it is one and one and one. Then what National Book Trust and Central Sahitya Academy are doing? They are really uniting all these things. But unfortunately, till today, over the last 75 years, Marathi people do not know what Odiya's people are talking. But in Maratha, there are some Odia scripts, Odia manuscripts, because of they were ruling over Odisha for 50 years. And there was a cultural relation between Maharashtra and Allah. And Bangla, Odisha and Assam don't discuss. If you discuss in an academic domain, you fight each other. But let me tell you, these 3 places are one. I am giving you one example. Nepal, Pashupati. पशु का पति थे शिवा, इसलिए पशुपति बने. When he came to be a कृषक शिवा, पशुपति शिव से कृषक शिव को आने के लिए उसको आसाम, बंगाल, उड़ीसा और महाराष्ट्र और मध्य प्रदेश जाना पड़ा. ये कहानी आपको फोकलोर से मिलेगा, जो माथुर जी कह रहे हैं, फोकलोर से मिलेगा. आसाम का शिवमंगल काव्य राम सरस्वती लिखा, तो there is a vivid description, the Parvati abusing Shiva not to eat ganja but to cultivate. Also cultivation, the first cultivator Shiva came in Assam, then came to Bangla, Shiva Mangal Kavya, then came to Odisha, Kalasa Chautisa. And these are the written documents of maybe it is 13th to 17th century. But in orality, the transformation of Pashupati Shiva to Krusaka Shiva in Eastern Indian culture has developed through rituals and performance and drama and art and music, so many things. How can you segregate this written literature from the performance and visual arts and the ritual performances? So there is a lot of, and another thing, जब बारिश नहीं होता है तो बेंग और बेंगुली को शादी कराते हैं. आपका आसाम में और बंगाल में भेकुली ब्याह है, और उड़ीसा में बेंग की शादी कराते हैं. एक हल्दी की पानी में एक मिट्टी की कटोरी में बेंग और चेंग को, यानी दो बेंग और बेंगुली मेल फीमेल को रख के उसके ऊपर पत्ता डाल के गीत गाते हैं, चेंग बेंग टोना टोनी आज गुड़ गुड़ कल के पानी. यानी एक मेल और फीमेल, प्रकृति और पुरुष को एक जगह में रख दिया पानी के अंदर, और उसके बाद देखो आज बादल करेगा और कल बारिश होगा. एंड दिस इज द रिचुअल्स ऑफ आसाम. So if you find the folklore side and the ancient literature both in oral and written tradition of these three areas, including Bhojpuri and Maithili, and जोड़ना है तो नेपाल को भी जोड़ दो. इतनी एरिया में हमको देखने को मिलता है. We belong to one culture. I can understand Nepali, cannot speak. I can very well understand Assamese, and I can speak Bengali at least 50%, no problem. कलकत्ता में मुझे 40 मिनट बंगाली में ही बोलने के लिए कहा गया. आई स्पोक. व्हाट इज रॉन्ग विद दैट? भाषा जा हो ता हो, भाव ठीक होना चाहिए. यस. नेक्स्ट कम्स द आसाम, बंगाल और उड़ीसा. ये तीन भाषा के ऊपर हम थोड़ी चर्चा कर रहे हैं. वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट 3 states. I mean these 3 states, not these 3 languages are dominant. There are other languages in those states, and from the contemporary point of view, if you see the living tradition, that means you see the past but see the present also and see the future. Bangladesh, 99% Bengali, only 15 lakhs Adivasis are there, but Bangladesh का जो बंगाली intellectuals हैं, वो नहीं चाहते कि आदिवासी भाषा में उनको पाठ पढ़ाएं, उनको भी बांग्ला में ही पढ़ाना है. भाई तुम तो बांग्ला भाषा को लेकर एक देश बनाया कि नहीं? तुम एक भाषा को लेकर देश बनाया, अपना मातृभाषा आमी छोड़बो ना, आमी बांगाली, आमार भाषा बांगाली, आमार जाति बांगाली, ये शेख मुजीबुर बोला. लेकिन उसी मुजीबुर के जो भी बाकी लोग हैं अभी जो काम कर रहे हैं, they are not ready to liberate these 15 lakhs Adivasis. I told them, this, if you do this, then you are going against the linguistic rights that you got in 1971 from Pakistan. 8% उर्दू पाकिस्तान में है, 92% बाकी लोग हैं पाकिस्तान में भी, 68% पंजाबी और सिंधी है. So you have to understand that, and the coexistence of culture is important, and language is instrumental to that. Our survival in our ecology, our survival in our socio-cultural situations is expressed in our language and literature. But the politics of language, politics of ideology, and politics of regionality really undermines the unity of humanity. जिस भक्ति के बात कह रहे थे माथुर जी, सच कहूं तो उसी भक्ति का भाषा नहीं है, भक्ति ही है. और जो लिखने पढ़ने वाले ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम करते हैं. Therefore, संत कबीर टोल्ड कि तू कहे कागज की लेखी और मैं कहूं आंखें की देखी. मिलियंस ऑफ पीपल, ये तीनों स्टेट का कम से कम 12 करोड़ लोग होंगे, और उसमें 12 लाख लोग इंटेलेक्चुअल्स होंगे. बाकी लोग को तो आप इंटेलेक्चुअल्स नहीं कहते, बट ऑल दोस पीपल आर आल्सो इंटेलेक्चुअल्स इन देयर प्रैक्टिस एक्सपीरियंस. वो जो अनुभव से जो ज्ञान निर्माण करते हैं वो है. तो उसका जो रिकंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ हिस्ट्री के जो बात कह रहे थे माथुर जी, आई बिलीव दैट धर्मपाल, द राइटर ऑफ द ब्यूटीफुल ट्री, उसने कहा है कि भारत की आत्मा, वो जो पेड़ है उसको अंग्रेजों ने उखाड़ा था, लेकिन उसका जड़ अभी भी मिट्टी में है. उसमें थोड़ा सा पानी हवा देने से वी कैन डिस्कवर द स्पिरिट ऑफ इंडिया, भारतीय आत्मा को आविष्कार किया जा सकता है. और देयर इज ए टाइम, दिस टाइम हैज कम टू रीडिस्कवर द होल थिंग. बट मल्टीलिंगुअलिटी is a reality in India. It is a compromise in somewhere, and it is a stupidity in Europe. In 1980s, people of Europe said multilinguality is a stupidity, bilinguality is bilingual is a compromise, and monolinguality is a reality. Today, in Europe and America and Canada, multilingualism is a reality, and it is a compromise, and monolingualism is a stupidity. And this thing came from India, that multilinguality is really giving space to all the people for a cultural democracy and linguistic democracy. And there is a need for reconstructing the history of India through its literature, language, and social history and geographic, cultural geography. I am thankful to you very much, Bratin. You have called me to here, and I really feel elevated when I see that this Shiva, how this Pasupati Shiva came to become a Krishaka Shiva in our Sarla Mahabharata, in Rama Saraswati, in Mangal Kavya, and also in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. There are hundreds of such rituals performed by the Gond people, the Adivasi people of Madhya Pradesh, that the Krishak Shiva Parikalpana, which came from Eastern India, entered to the middle and Maharashtra. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Yes, any question from the audience? Thank you.
देवेंद्र चौबे, ये विषय बहुत अच्छा है मल्टीलिंगुअल इंडिया का. मैं सोच रहा था कि उड़ीसा वेस्ट बंगाल के साथ अगर बिहार होता तो क्या होता है. आमतौर से वेस्ट बंगाल के अंदर ही बिहार उड़ीसा रहा है. और हितेन जी बहुत अच्छी बात कर रहे थे कि जिस हम मल्टीलिंगुअलिज्म की बात कर रहे हैं उसमें हिस्ट्री की बहुत ज़रूरत है. बिना इतिहास के उसकी व्याख्या करना बहुत मुश्किल है. थोड़ा सा मैं महेंद्र जी के बातों से थोड़ा सा मैं सोच रहा था कि ये दोनों चीज़ का सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं. कबीर के बहाने अनुभव को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, लेकिन कबीर जिस कागज़ की बात करते हैं वो हमारा वैदिक ट्रेडिशन है, वैदिक साहित्य है, उसको नकारने की बात करते हैं कबीर. कि तू कहता कागज का लेखी, मतलब जो जितने संत थे उस दौर के वे सारे के सारे वेद पुराण की बात कर रहे थे. कबीर कहते कि मैं अनुभव की बात कर रहा हूँ. तो कई बार होता है कि बहुत सारे ट्रेडिशंस, और हितेन जी ने बहुत अच्छी बात कही कि बिना भक्ति परंपरा को समझे, कवियों को समझे, इस मल्टीलिंगुअल भारत को समझना बहुत कठिन है. तो अच्छा लगा कि पैनल बहुत अच्छा है और बहुत अच्छी बातचीत हुई. और कोई सवाल तो नहीं है, लेकिन फिर भी है कि इतिहास की जरूरत तो है चीजों को समझने के लिए.
Thank you, Deven ji. I think you have raised a very pertinent question, and this had come to my mind. You know, Bihar was part of Bengal presidency, and whether we realize it or not, these three states which you are talking about was also part of that quote-unquote Bengal presidency. Therefore, this is something around which we can pose a question. You have not posed a direct question, but there is a question there. And I am really happy that you have raised this question. You know, Sir has rightly brought in history and the gaze, the way we look at the past. And here it is something around which we can say one or two things. One, if you look for the differences, you know, Pavitra Sarkar, eminent scholar from Bengal, he used to say that we don't have one Bengali, we have 5 Bengalis. And some of those, I mean, these differences are there. One kind of Bengali is not understood properly by other kind of Bengali users. So these differences are there. You know, these differences are not the differences of a very permanent kind. So if you look for differences which the Britishers did, as he's rightly pointed out, we will end up saying that, yeah, there were so many differences here and there. But if you broaden the entire thing and see the entire tradition in a way which is constructive, which is creative, then you will find lots of things where these languages do make all of us actually have underlined this need for looking into that those kind of similarities or common grounds, and so that we can find a living tradition in India. I'm really thankful to the people. I should not say this, he's supposed to say all this, but even as a speaker, I found that we three together have tried to argue something very, very similar at one level. And that is something which we can be very proud of. Thank you.
I have an answer to your question, Professor. A keyword, Vidyapati. Just like Joydev, the cultural ambassadors. In the post-colonial context, such theme is very think-provoking, because when I apply for loan from bank, the amount is credited in favor of my account. Similarly, when two languages come in a contact situation, we borrow, some language borrow words, morphological terms, technical terms, in favor of its own phonological pattern, which is termed by the linguist phonological nativization. That's why when these languages came to the contact of English in the British rule, these languages didn't turn into English. Likely, in Persian and Arabic influence, the vocabulary was enriched. Then why the Indo-Aryan influence in the Odro-Magodhi area will be so strong that a linguistic shift would happen? This is the question. This is the question in favor of an indigenous origin of these languages. When we found the fourth major rock edict in Girnar, 3rd century BC by Maurya king Ashoka, we found a word Dadoso. In the 12th line of the 4th edict, the bow, labial bow, in place of labiodental antostebo, which is an influence of Bangla language in 3rd century BC. When we talk about maritime history, the Oriya culture will be found in Bali. When we talk about Tibeto-Buddhist hub, Oriya, Bengal and Assamia culture is connected and are connected, and at the same time, Assam is connected with the Silk Road via Burma. So, we have to reconstruct our cultural history with the help of archaeology, linguistics, with the help of history, where we can face our collective memory. And that's all for this evening. Thank you all.
I will request my editorial colleague, Ms. Muskan, to present a bag to all our speakers. I thank you all for joining this session and also thank the distinguished speakers for this insightful discussion. Thank you very much.